And we are live.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of All Things 3D. I'm Chris Kopak,
And I'm Mike Balzer.
and today we have a special guest. His name's Steve Hernandez, and he's the lead developer on and co-creator of a project called Creation Workshop. How are you today, Steve?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Doing real well. Doing real well. Happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I guess we'll get started with some questions. So why don't you kind of tell us about your stuff, where you're from, and what you do for a living?
All right. Well, like I said before, my name's Steve Hernandez. I've been a professional software developer for about 20 years at this point. I currently work at a company called QRC Technologies based out of Fredericksburg, Virginia. I myself live out of Silver Spring. At my job, I'm a prototype engineer, prototype specialist. So I do a lot of software and mechanical prototyping for clients.
Wow.
Wow, that sounds good. Great, I appreciate it. And so what we'd like to do is kind of go through some questions with you, and I sent you some already, so hopefully there's no surprises here. So
All right.
as mentioned, we talked to Brad Hill a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of asked him, well, what kind of software are you using in order to print with? I said, are you creating your own? Do you have some proprietary software? And he says, no, we're using a product called Creation Workshop. And sadly, I guess I don't know everything. I had not heard of it until then. So he sent me a couple of links, and then I told him, you might want to mention it to Steve, and maybe he'll come on. And sure enough, you sent me an email, and I thought, wow, it'd be great to actually talk to somebody who's creating some software to use with SLAs, since they're really in the news right now. And so I thought,
yeah, there's not a lot of software out there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I've taken an opportunity to look at it. So let's see where I'm at. So as mentioned, I've worked with the software that you make, and I find that it's extremely polished. And
Oh, thank you.
I have a Form 1, so I use the preform software, and I find that to be a fairly polished application as well. And I've used some other applications that aren't so polished, like the B9 creators. And
Sure.
If I would have known about this, I may have hung on to my B9 creator. So why don't we kind of talk about what platforms this is available for, and what printers and things like that.
All right. Well, when I first started the project, I decided early on that I definitely wanted multi-OS compatibility. I decided to code it, well, the two toss-ups were coding it in Java, Python, or C#. Well, three toss-ups. I decided to go with C# because I was very familiar with the language. So Creation Workshop runs natively on Windows, and then it can also run on Mac and Linux-based systems through Mono.
Okay, I've heard other people using that. Do you find it difficult to work in C#? But as you mentioned, you've used that for a while now. I do some iOS development, and I've been thinking of doing some cross-platform, and I can't remember the name of the actual application, but C# is its main programming language. So would you recommend that to anybody else who's starting out in programming?
Oh, definitely. C#'s a great language. It definitely alleviates a lot of the shortcomings of Java. It takes the best features from both C++ and Java. It's got great memory management tools, memory collection, garbage collection, that sort of thing. Easy to work with. A lot of good integration, and now it's pretty cross-platform compatible.
Okay. Well, as mentioned, this program seems like it would work well with the multiple of printers. I think you mentioned on the actual website that it can work with SLA, DLP type printers, and possibly even FDM type printers. If that's the case, maybe you can give us a rundown of. I noticed the application, if you download it, doesn't come with much other than a generic profile. So maybe you can tell us who's created some profiles for different printers and what printers those are.
Sure. Well, when I initially started this application, I wanted to be able to support DLP and SLA printer types. I actually just recently added support for laser SLA machines too through the LaserShark board. I'm still kind of in the process of testing that out. FDM was actually somewhat of an afterthought. but I definitely want to be able to support as many machine types as possible. As far as other printers that are out there, well, that use my software, Dean Piper from the Move project recently contacted me. He's integrating support with his printers into my software at this point. Bobby Lampright from Elite Image Works with the Deep Imager 5. I actually had to do a special binary driver for him. Center Tech, Jewelry CAD 3D, the OSRC group, Demetrius out there with his multi-projector support. A ton of home hobbyists. It's basically the software can support just generic G-code through, through the serial port. So any kind of printer that can support G-code can really work.
Wow, this is cool. So, and is your project? So, are you you're writing it in C#, and so is it an open source project or not really at this point?
Well, it's an interesting question. I started it as an open source project. I started it primarily just to drive my printer. And I put it out there as an open source project on GitHub for other people to see and use. And after about 10 releases or so, I actually started getting contacted by commercial vendors, printer manufacturers, and they were asking me what my licensing fees were. And at that point, I wanted to have an open source product, but yet I still wanted to make a little cash here on the side from people who want to use the project or product. So what I did was I actually created a plugin system. So the main creation workshop is absolutely free and it'll remain free. And I've got the source code there out on GitHub for people to pull down and use. What I have been doing is actually customizations through a plugin-based system. So I can add in or remove different elements of the GUI. I can put in different machine profiles, binary drivers, different slicers, all sorts of things. Custom theming, splash screens, color themes, all those sorts of things. So I offer a creation of plugins for vendors and then a per-machine licensing fee.
Oh, that's genius. I like that. I really like that idea. I wish more open source software would kind of adopt that kind of style, leaving the core of it open, but then developers like yourself who need to get compensated for their time, and I mean, you're pouring many hours of your time into this, and I mean, there's not that many people that can do it, so you need to be compensated. So it's actually this seems like a really good way to go, because you could just buy or license just a segment, and plug it in. So I really actually really like that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I like that idea as well. Well, getting back to the coding that you mentioned using C#, I mentioned in the questions that I sent you that it seemed a little laggy on my machine, and I've got a fairly fast machine. Is there a reason for that, or is that?
I'm not quite sure what's going on with your machine. Typically, I don't find. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I may have some things running in the background, but if you're not finding that on your end, it probably is on my end. So.
I use the OpenTK bindings to OpenGL through C#, and it's possible that your OpenGL implementation in OpenTK is using the software-based drivers instead of the hardware-based drivers. So it's possible that it's just doing software rendering on your end, which is a little bit slower than the hardware-based acceleration.
Okay, and how would I be able to determine if I'm using it or not?
I'd probably have to send you a checklist after this to help you debug it and walk through it.
Good. Sounds great. Yeah, I'd like to see if that's the issue or not. Yeah, I've got, what do I have, a GTX 650, so that should be fast enough to run it. So, okay, well, let's kind of go on to some other questions. As I mentioned earlier, I guess I should click on myself. Normally this does it automatically, so now I'm actually having to produce it, so I apologize if I lag a little bit on
that's all right.
different faces. But as I mentioned, I have a Form Labs, and I use the Preform software. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to work with it. How do you think yours compares to it, or has anybody kind of identified it? I mentioned it to you that it's your program seems well-rounded and compares, in my opinion, very well to it. What do you think?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, the Preform software I have played around with here before a couple times. I definitely do like the ease of use and the visual style. It's my understanding that software was written, just for the Preform printer or the Form 1 printer, so it's not directly transportable to other printers. So they can kind of take some shortcuts, just assuming, it's going to be set up on a single machine or with a limited number of profiles. The software is definitely easy to use, so you'll just, click on an object and bring it in, and it can automatically generate supports and get the build ready for you. So I've definitely taken a few hints from the Preform software. I'm trying to make mine as easy to use as possible, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, as mentioned, the only thing that if I had a suggestion for it, and maybe you have these and I didn't turn them on, is tooltips. I know the term RTFM. Chris, do you know what that means?
No idea. What's RTFM?
Well, since we're family friendly, you'll have to figure that out for yourself.
Oh, got it.
Got it already. Huh?
Yeah.
Read the But so
the manual. Read the manual.
Yeah.
Read the manual with an extra F.
Yeah.
All right.
For Frank, but I kind of like tooltips because your application is fairly intuitive once you understand the icons, and a little tooltip can kind of bring you over the edge. So is that something I just didn't enable, or is that something you're going to do in the future?
Well, about half the buttons actually do have tooltips on them. However, there's a little bit of inconsistency in timing, so you'll have to hover your mouse button over, or mouse cursor over them for a few seconds before they pop up. But then again, not every button has them. It's actually been a while since I've updated the manual. I haven't updated the manual since beta release 13, and I'm at an actual release version 22 at this point. So I need to swap out lots of different screenshots and do lots of rewriting. So.
Okay, well that would make sense then. So, but yeah, that would be my only thing, is that because you can pretty much plunge right into it, and it has a very intuitive feel to it. Obviously, I don't have it hooked up to a printer, but I guess when I get to that point, I'll hit the manual. But and we're hoping to have a printer soon, right, Chris?
Yeah. From Brad Hill, one of Brad Hill's his Little SLA or Little DLP, or kind of, he's been going between both names. So I know you've taken hints from the Form Labs machine, but is your software at all, has anybody ever printed on the Form 1 with your software?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't have a Form 1, and I don't personally know anybody with a Form 1, so it's tough to get my hands on one to try to take a look at their protocol between the machine and the printer. I'm not sure if it's a custom binary protocol or if it's just standard serial G code. If it's standard serial G code, I'm pretty sure that I'd be able to adapt to it pretty quickly. And even if it's a binary protocol like the B9 or something like that, it's just really a matter of swapping in a new lower level driver.
So even DLP. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Maybe we can talk afterwards. As mentioned, I do have a Form 1, so
all right.
Maybe we can do some data capture and go from there.
So even DLP printers, they use the standard serial G code.
Well, the whole issue was, when I started this project about 2 years ago, there was very little standardization going on. Some people were using a Mach 3 macro with just standard parallel port-driven CNC hardware to drive their DLP machines. Some people had, hacked on different Arduino or Raspberry Pi boards, and they were doing some custom protocols. When I started this project, I really wanted to be able to leverage off of the huge amount of hardware that was already existing and available for, FDM-based printers. So I started taking a look at the ramps boards, and I quickly realized, it's got everything and more than I would possibly need to drive the DLP printer on that board already. So why not just use it? And that's the first initial port that I put in.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. One of the things I noticed with the B9 Creator is that the actual DLP projectors had an RS-232 port that I guess was being controlled. Is this required on all DLP printers?
No, it's more of a convenience, actually. A lot of current projectors have a serial port in the back, and you can send them serial commands at 9600 baud and tell them things like turn on, turn off. So inside Creation Workshop, what you can actually do is when you start a build, you can turn the projector on via serial command, wait for it to warm up, perform the print, and then after the print is completed, you could send the command to turn the projector off. That way it'll save a little on bulb life.
Oh.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Well, I was noticing I'm looking at actually using a Pico projector. They've got some new 1,000 lumen printers that I'm going to look at using with it in order to keep the whole little SLA very compact and small. It's kind of sad that you've got this small little SLA printer and then you got this whopping DLP underneath it. So I want to
Right.
try and reduce the size of it. And then we just talked about in our new series, Review in 3D, or 3D in Review, uh, about this new one that was just started on Kickstarter. If you go out 3ders.org, what's it called? The M1.
Maker one or something.
Yeah, I just saw that yesterday. It looks like a really great hardware and software package.
Yeah, and if you look at it, there's a very small base, so I have a feeling they're using a Pico projector or something like that.
I know 3 or 4 different hardware manufacturers who are actually switching to Pico projectors at this point. They definitely do require a few more modifications than just a standard DLP projector, though.
Okay, so do you know of anybody who's identified that out there and has put some notes or so forth? So if I do go in that direction, I can have some location so I'm not completely going in the dark on it?
Well, I've actually got some notes on my project blog that I could point you to after this segment here. I've
Sounds
modified a
great.
Pico projector. I took off the original LEDs. I took out the UV filtering mechanism. I put on a 365 and a 405 nanometer 10-watt LED, and I've got it all heat synced through my little Pico projector. And I'm actually able to cure some resin through it.
Wow, that sounds neat. Yeah, then you're the source then. I've been looking at an Acer printer that, like I said, does about 1,000 lumens. What is the modified Pico that you're working with? What's the lumens?
I am using an AXAA. I don't recall the model number off the top of my head. It's just got 1024 by 768 resolution. I picked it up primarily because it was DLP and it was cheap. I think I got it for $150 as a refurb.
On eBay or?
No, actually through the AXAA site. They sell refurbs there.
AXAA, so cool.
Yeah, Amazon sells them as well. Well, that's pretty cool, Steve. I will get back with you on that. One of the reasons that I looked at the Acer is, one is 1,000 lumens, but that's one of the reasons I asked the question on the RS-232 port. As you're probably aware of, a lot of those Pico projectors don't have that, so it's good to know that you may not need them. And I did know from talking with Brad that he's had to make modifications, and I've read some of the forum items that you've got to remove, like you mentioned the UV filter, and then I was thinking maybe you could swap out. I know they're going to be coming out with UV LEDs so that you don't even have to go through a white light process, and that will be kind of cool.
Yeah, there's actually a few projectors out there that will work completely unmodified, but a lot of the projectors that you do get, do require some modification to shorten the throw distance or to remove some UV filtering. You also have to look at this in combination with the resins that you're choosing to print with. So what you want to be able to do is match the output frequency of the light of the projector against the input frequency of the resin that you're using. So if you're using a resin that's using a more visible light spectrum, you don't really have to worry too much about the UV mods.
Yeah, well, like I said, I have a Form 1, so I have a lot of Form 1 resin, so I'm assuming that I'd have to go into more UV spectrum. I think it's, I want to say 430. I can't even remember the nanometer of the wavelength itself, but I think it's 405. I bought some line lasers to match that for the curing process. I made my own little curing bin
Oh, cool.
based upon that. So I think it's like 405, but I won't bet the farm on that.
Yeah, 405 and 370 something are pretty standard spikes right there.
Okay, so yeah, I think it is 405 then. So let's move on to the next item, which is give us kind of a show and tell. Nice thing about Google Hangouts is that it's visual, so I don't know if you've worked with it, but up in the left-hand corner there is a tool that allows you to share your screen. So if you've got your application up and running and you want to give us kind of a 5-minute demo, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I'm a little new at this here. Let's see if it actually works. Screen share. Let's see. All right. Let me see if I could just do full screen. All right. You guys seeing my screen or not?
We're seeing it.
All right. All right. So let me just jump into Creation Workshop here. So after you load the program up, you're basically just presented with, a blank area here. So we'll go through the process of loading up some objects, placing them around the platform here, generating some supports, connecting to a machine, all the sort of basic stuff. So let me just find my directory full of objects. All right, so let me load up a couple things here. You can hold down the control key and select multiple objects too. So let's find the kernel and a bearing. All right, so right now I just loaded in a few objects and it's telling me that they're not fitting on the platform, which is pretty obvious. So let me take the time to scale this guy down a little bit here and see what we can do. All right, now he's kind of embedded inside of a gear.
Yeah.
So
and
let's
I found
automatically.
those tools on the right-hand side very intuitive and figure them out quickly. And I do see your tooltips though, so maybe I was just choosing something did not have a tooltip. So.
All right, so we're just going to click the auto arrange here, and it will automatically lay out your objects on the platform for you. So we can also double-click on an object to select it here. We can hold down the Shift key and move the mouse cursor, and this will slide it around the XY plane. So let's move that back a little bit. All right, so let's generate some supports, which is always a common task people want to do. So actually, let's move it up a little bit. We will rotate it. Let's move it up a little bit more. And then I'm going to pull out my automatic support generation tools over here. So the simplest type of support you could add is the bed of nails support. And this just adds supports at a regular grid interval shown by the numbers down here. Some interesting things that we can do, actually, before we even start generating supports, is I'm going to take a look at all the downward-facing polygons. So I can click this little button over here. Maybe we'll set this to 22 degrees. So anything below 22 degrees is now lit up in red. That actually might be a little difficult to see, so let me turn on anti-aliasing here. Or not anti-aliasing, sorry. My X-ray transparent mode. So you can see the highlighted red areas are the downward-facing areas on the object. And let's see, let's just go ahead and generate some supports. So I've got my bed of nails selected. I'm going to automatically generate some supports. The bed of nails algorithm is pretty fast. I also have two other algorithms built inside there, which can better find the lower hanging areas of the object to automatically generate supports for them. So now that we've generated supports, I'm going to go ahead and add a platform base for them.
Can I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure.
Again, comparing this to the Form 1, they suggest strongly, and I found this to be true, is that you have to use about a 20 to 30 degree angle for all your components. And I noticed that you're not having to do that here. Is that because it's a DLP process, or is it more because of the what do they call the peeling process that the Form 1 uses?
That's an interesting question. I'm not quite sure where they got that 20. What did you say it was? 20 something degree for overhang?
It's between
Um,
20 or 30, and literally I do it manually now, but if you do it automatically, it even puts more of an angle. But I try to do as flat as possible. And if you do it flat, it the prints don't come out. They fall apart or something like that. So I
uh,
found that if you if you angle it 20 degrees, and then if you offset the bed, you shouldn't use it in the center of the bed as well. Uh, then you get fairly good parts. And I was just wondering if you've had any experience with that. Uh,
no, no, not offhand, actually. I'll actually have to take a look at that, research a little bit more. All right, so moving on here, you can highlight individual supports and move them around the platform bed, holding down the Shift key. And as you do this, you can see that they automatically scale to fit underneath the object that they're supporting. Another thing you can do is hold down the Control key and click, and that will angle the supports in to get into some of those harder to reach areas.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a real neat feature. And I like the fact that you can select them individually. Form 1 or the preform software just allowed manual control of it, but it's literally just adding or deleting. I don't believe you can reposition them. So
Uh,
this is a real neat feature.
all right, so let's add back the base in there. So when I've got the object, or multiple objects, how I like it, I can go in and I can save this. Let's say test scene. And I can save this either as a single STL file or as a CWS file. Now, this CWS file is Creation Workshop Scene. And basically, it's just a zip file in disguise. It saves all the objects inside of there along with the manifest file. The scene file also allows you to hold information after the object has already been sliced. So if you want to take some time to place and position your object and generate supports and then slice the scene, you can export the image slices directly into that CWS file and then later just reuse that CWS file just for printing. So let's go ahead and take a look at some slicing options. So now we've gotten a scene and it looks pretty ready to print, or I probably wouldn't print that as is, but I'd probably just lay this object down flat. That would make much more sense. But for the sake of argument here, say we're ready to print this, we can take a look at our slicing profiles. So what I wanted to do here was to be able to allow the user to create
Could I interrupt
multiple.
just again? I noticed
Yeah, sure.
you didn't have any internal supports. Are you just doing that out of speed, or would you have actually put some internal supports for the gears?
I probably would have put some internal supports on. The next version of my support generation algorithm is actually going to natively support intra-supports. So if an object needs to be supported between 2 points, it can do that. Currently, it's just attaching the supports to the platform bed.
Oh, very cool.
All right. So taking a look here at some of the slicing profile options. All right, so we can choose some different slice profile options, and it will load and save them here all for you. And we create a new one. We're just taking a look. We've got our slice thickness, how long to expose it per layer. In order to get good adhesion to the build plate, you normally want to expose the first couple layers for a little bit longer. So that's what this setting here is for, the bottom layers exposure time. I also have a feature built in for anti-aliasing the slice images. Some people on my forums have actually found that if you render the slices at a much larger scale and then scale them down with bilinear bicubic filtering, the edges of them get kind of fuzzy, but when you actually print it, it's very similar to the pixel shifting technology by EnvisionTech, and it produces a much smoother edge. We also have the option here for exporting the images and the G-code into the CWS file that I was talking about. If you're using a system that uses a first surface mirror to reflect either once or twice, we've also got options to support image reflection. I also support generating a cost for the object that you're trying to print. So you can plug in a price per liter for the resin, and then back on the, I think it's object info screen, it'll tell you how much something will cost to print. Well, after I've sliced. Let's see. So with the DLP printer, you know, there's a lot of different ways for vat separation mechanisms. And one of the main ways that people have been building their printers is sort of a lifting sequence, a lift and peel. I know the, I think it's the Form 1 uses a slide mechanism, I want to say. Is that correct? Still with me?
Mike's muted.
Ah, okay. I think the Form 1 printer does use a slide-based mechanism, or some printers do. But I wanted to be able to automatically generate a lift and sequence timing here. So you can say how far you want the axis to lift up, and then calculate it automatically as far as generation of the G-code. So let's just go ahead and generate some G-code here, and we'll take a look at what's actually being sent to the machine. All right, G-code and slicing is done. So let's take a look at the slice views first here. We can walk through and see exactly on a slice-by-slice basis what's going to be projected to the projector, or shown on the projector. We can also take a look at the G-code view and see exactly which G-code sequences are going to be sent. So I've actually modified G-code a little bit here and embedded some statements inside of G-code comments. So here, all G-code comments start with a semicolon. So after the semicolon, I've actually embedded a few commands. So slice 0 will actually show image slice 0 on the projector. Delay 6000 is, you know, wait for 6,000 milliseconds before moving on to the next command. Slice blank, show a blank slice. There's a couple other custom commands that can get embedded as well. Let's see. So this is the G-code that's sent in sequence with the images to the printer during a print sequence.
Wow.
And now that I've actually sliced, we can take a look at some of the individual slices. I'm not sure how well this is showing up on the screen.
It looks great, yeah.
Transparent view, you can kind of see exactly where all the slices fall. The slice number is down here, where we could just jump to a slice.
Wow, so you can actually see where it, wow,
right, you can see the
intersection.
geometry. Yes, the geometry of where that Z level intersected with the object.
Wow. This is very similar to my ProGrade. I mean, it looks like even more complete in a lot of ways than my ProGrade FDM software.
Ah, well, thank you. You know, speaking of plugins from that conversation before, you know, initially I wanted to support DLP printers with Creation Workshop. However, I've also been working on a better FDM-based plugin. Around beta 13 of Creation Workshop, I had some initial FDM supports built into the GUI. However, a lot of users were kind of complaining that they didn't want to see all the FDM-based controls for their DLP printer. So now with this plugin system, you know, if you load up the FDM plugin, the FDM controls will appear, and if you don't have it enabled or installed, you'll only see the DLP controls. And that's sort of how I'd like to take the product here in the future for supporting SLS-based machines as well as powder-based printers with inkjet printheads.
Wow.
I'm actually currently working with a few other groups right now to incorporate SLS controls and printhead-based controls. So we'll see where that goes over the summer.
Wow. And so is there a place where people, where our listeners and myself could go to see which actual printers are already in production, maybe even commercial printers that are compatible with your software?
A printer compatibility list. That's a good question. I have mentioned a few on my buildyourownSLA.com forums. I don't think I've got a comprehensive list. Even on my envisionlabs.net website, I think I've only got 3 or 4 people listed. I'm currently working with, I think, 9 or 10 companies at this point that are going to be releasing printers this year that have some variation of Creation Workshop driving them.
Hey, Steve, if you hit the screen share again, it'll bring you back to your camera.
Sure. Whoops. All right.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the software and giving us a little demo. I hope it says I hope our listeners learn as much as I did. That was it was a pretty good demo, and it's good to learn it right from the man himself. You know, sometimes that's what it takes to get down into the nitty-gritty with the person that actually developed the software, kind of see your thought process and walk through, you know, the correct workflow, you know.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah,
You know,
I think
something
it
that I
worked.
was... sorry.
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Okay. Well, something that I was toying with is, in addition to updating the print manuals, the PDFs, I also wanted to do a series of just kind of video posts on my YouTube channel with 3 or 4 minute segments on how to load objects, how to position them, how to generate supports with the various algorithms, how to initially connect your machine, or how to generate slice profiles, things like that. So look for those in the future.
Well, as mentioned, we did do an interview with Brad Hill, who's coming out with the Little SLA, and this will be the software that he's planning to use with it. So you've got a sneak peek at the kind of software that you'll be able to use to control the Little SLA. Has Titan One, I can't remember who created it, have they approached you yet, or are they working on their own software? Do you know?
They were initially working on their own software, which I think was a variation of Projector by Gary Hodgson. They actually did approach me, and we're talking about what we can work out right now. They had a very successful Kickstarter. Yeah.
They sure did. So I'm glad to hear that they are talking with you. So Chris, why don't you wrap it up for us?
So for our listeners out there, where can we find your software? Where can we find you? The Creation Workshop website, and maybe a place where they could donate Bitcoin or money or whatever to help contribute to your project in some way. Where can we find you?
All right. Well, I run the Build Your Own SLA forum, so it's www.buildyourownSLA.com. That's a web forum that I set up primarily as, a support forum for this software because I couldn't handle 50 people emailing me today with questions. So I wanted a community area where people could answer their own questions. I also run the www.envisionlabs.net website. The best place to get the latest version of the software would probably be my Build Your Own SLA forum inside the software subforum. I don't always post full releases to my GitHub, but my GitHub definitely does have the latest version of the source code.
But you'll have to compile the source code, I take it.
Right, you'll have to compile it yourself if you want to go that route.
So that's maybe a little over the average user's head, but for those programmers that want to get out there and know how to do that, they can do that.
And this is his website here, so www.envisionlabs.net, and that'll take you out to his software. So again, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chris, and this is another interview episode of All Things 3 with the Movers and Shakers.
Well, thanks for having me out.
All right. Thanks.
Hope to talk to you again soon.
And we are terminating.